Hey guys, after a day or two of reading these stories, it sparked something that happened to me quite a few years ago. I haven't told anybody the complete context of this story, only a summarized version to a few people, but it haunted me as a kid. If you are in for a good, wow, that's screwed up, read or listen, you're in for it. What you're about to read or hear is 100% true, so I will begin. It was back when I was about 10 years old, 17 now, and I was walking to my friend's house. It was on a Saturday around noon, and my friend lived about a 5-minute, if not less, walk from my house. About halfway through the walk, a rainstorm came out of nowhere. Being 10 years old and just wanting to get to my friend's house, I decided against running back for a jacket. When I reached the street off of my friend's street, an inconspicuous white van pulled up beside me. The sliding door swung open, and a lady in her early 30s asked me if I wanted a ride, as it was obviously raining out and I had no jacket. Being a very safe kid, I told her I was going to a friend's house just up the street and that I was fine, to which she insinuated that I had to get in with them and that they would drive me there. A little backstory on the van. In my southern Ontario city at the time, there were constant news reports of, and I kid you not, a white van abducting numerous children, and actually I believe one of the children believed to be abducted by this van was actually killed. The van was described as a white Dodge Caravan, and I always remembered this because it was the same type of van my mom drove, but she drove a blue one. Anyways, back to the story. So, as I told the van I was fine, the remembrance of the story of the white van sparked to my mind. The van was known by the locals as Old Grump, as an elderly man with a forwards ball cap was always seen driving it. And I was absolutely mortified when I looked toward the driver's seat to see an old man with a ball cap at the wheel. I'm even getting chills thinking about this right now, let alone being alone on a street with these creeps in front of me. When I noticed the old man, I remembered more details of the van. The obstructed or non-existent plates. Considering I was about 2 feet from the back of the van, I glanced to look at the license plates, which were obscured by a garage bag. The total time elapsed between the van pulling up, me saying no, the lady trying to get me inside, and the realization of the situation was probably around 45 seconds. When I realized what could possibly happen, I told her I really had to go. I darted out of there. I've never moved so fast in my entire life. As I began to run, I heard the lady curse. Shit. And the door came slamming shut. The van began to accelerate again, but luckily for me, after cutting across a few lawns, I was maybe 20 meters away from my friend's house. As I reached my friend's house, I recall jumping over the water runoff between his and his neighbor's house and coming to the porch staircase. Now, most houses in my area have maybe 2 to 4 steps and then their front door, but my friend, living in a condo, had about 15 steps, with the door being about 2 meters off of the ground. I sped up the steps as fast as I could, pounded on his door and looked through the glass and saw him slowly walking towards the door. At this point I was screaming, "Cody, open the door," and then turned around to see the van just arriving across the street, maybe 2 doors down, in a suburban neighborhood, so maybe 50 feet away. My friend perked up and bolted towards the door, quickly unlocked it, and I rushed inside. To save some time, I summarized the story to him. We were both 10 years old and just intended on an afternoon of playing some Tom and Jerry style Street Fighter on PS2 when this whole ordeal happened. We panicked and didn't know what to do. His parents weren't home, nor were mine, and we wouldn't dare go outside to fetch help from the neighbors. We were on the border of calling the police. This is where it gets real messed up. We picked up the phone, but the line was dead. No calling the police. I know it sounds BS, but the area was only a few months old, so the phone and internet was extremely unpredictable, and with the now harsh weather, it was no surprise that the line went dead. We lay down on his living room floor. It hid us from plain sight and allowed us to look out the front window, and began peering outside with a pair of mini binoculars he had in his room. We always used to play army outside and stuff, so even though the circumstances were life-threatening, we wanted an excuse to use the binoculars. My friend handed them to me, and I brought them to my eyes. I looked outside, and to my surprise, nobody was in the van anymore. Completely empty. I handed them to my friend, and he stopped his breathing. I remember whispering, "What is it, dude? What, man?" And then before he answered, banging began on the garage door. Dead serious. We almost pissed ourselves. I was also on the verge of crying. My buddy Cody was frozen solid, and we didn't know what to do. Considering it was a condo, the garage was in close proximity to where we were. The living room, 15 feet from the front door, so we could hear everything. We heard the handle on the garage being fumbled with, so we grabbed kitchen knives and proceeded down the stairs silently. When we got to the bottom of the first flight of stairs, Cody remembered in a moment of panic that his dad's, I believe, uncle lived in the bottom flat of the condo and was possibly home. We pushed open his door and began calling out his name, Brian, but he wasn't there. We were petrified but felt a sense of security because we had 2 kitchen knives and Cody was a black belt in karate and kicked the shit out of kids twice his size. With our knives, we proceeded into the garage. Scared my heart was racing so fast that these creeps might hear it. We silently listened to the noises outside from the garage, communicating in gestures. The attempts to gain access to the house were sporadic and occurred over a time frame of maybe 20 minutes. Eventually, everything ceased. I held my breath and my heart stopped beating so fast. After about 20 seconds of staring at the garage handle, we heard a single word. Dang. It was the voice of a man, and that single word rung through my ears like a bullet and caused me to not sleep for nights on end. After standing there in shock and fear, afraid to move, we gathered the courage to make our way back upstairs. A few minutes later, there was a ring at the door. My heart dropped and I'm almost certain that my nuts did too. We proceeded cautiously with our knives in hand. When we peered through the peephole, we saw Rogers, telephone company here in Canada, worker at the door with a clipboard. We opened up the door and bombarded this guy with questions, eventually amounting to asking if he was the one trying to enter the house. He wasn't. The van started up and left. Okay, so this is a story that happened to me when I was somewhere around the age of 12 or 13. I believe it was my best friend Anna's 13th birthday, but I could be mistaken. Regardless, that puts the year this happened around 2003 or 2004. I had known Anna since kindergarten. We had gone to elementary school together for several years, but then she moved to the other side of town when her mom remarried. So we only saw each other on special occasions, when my mom would drive me across town to spend the night. Now, this house was a weird house. It was in a pretty upscale neighborhood, a gated community if I remember correctly, but the entire area outside of the immediate neighborhood was sort of crap. For reference, this was in the San Bernardino area of California. Beyond that, Anna's stepdad was a total creep. He used to make sexual references around all of us young girls, and I'm pretty sure he was physically abusive to my friend's mom. Not to mention, he was generally unpleasant to be around. He just seemed to get angry at the drop of a hat. While this isn't 100% relevant to what happened, it helps you get an idea of the overall atmosphere of the household. Anyway, so cue the night of the birthday party. I always felt like the odd one out. Anna had made a ton of new friends at her middle school, and they all knew each other pretty well. There were about 10 of us in total, I think. So I had to try pretty hard to be involved in these sleepovers, or I would end up in the corner alone. Early on in the night, while Anna's mom and stepdad were still awake, it was a typical birthday cake and balloons and singing sort of party. Meanwhile, however, Anna's new friends were cooking up what we should all do when the parents went to bed. In excited whispers, some of the girls started telling me about how they had invited 2 of the boys from their school to stop by around 1 a.m. They had promised to meet them at the side yard gate and let them in through the back door so as not to draw the attention of Anna's parents. Both of the guys were super cute, they promised me, and I wouldn't be disappointed. We played it cool until Anna's parents went to bed a little bit before midnight, and then it became a waiting game. As the hour drew closer, the girls started debating who would go outside to meet the guys. It quickly became evident that although it seemed like a good idea at the time, most of the girls were still a bit scared of going outside in the dark alone. Wanting to fit in and gain some respect from Anna's new friends, I volunteered to go. Anna agreed to join, as well as Brandy, who was the one who invited the boys to meet us in the first place. Quietly as we could, we opened the sliding glass door and crept into the backyard. I think it must have been a full moon because I remember it seemed super bright for 1 a.m. Anna's yard was pretty small and empty. We crept, giggling to ourselves, over to the wooden side gate and peeked into the front yard. Somebody was sitting on the curb. I remember I could see them quite clearly, despite the nearest streetlight being a couple houses away. They were facing away from us, hunched over with their knees pulled close to their body. It looked like they were waiting for something. Their hair appeared sparse and wispy, and they wore what looked like a gray wool suit. To top off of this strange sight, a strange briefcase sat next to them on the curb. I was instantly overcome by a sinking feeling in my stomach. Something wasn't right. This wasn't who we were expecting that was described to me. That was for certain. For what felt like a long moment, nobody said anything. We just stood peering over the fence. Then I heard Brandy's voice behind me speaking in a loud whisper so as to not alert Anna's parents. "Josh, Eric, is that you?" For the briefest of moments, I thought the stranger had not heard her. They remained with their backs turned to us, facing the empty street. Then slowly but deliberately, they twisted at the waist to stare directly at us. It became clear that it was a man, but much older than anybody we were looking for. His eyes were incredibly wide, almost circular, but the rest of his face was expressionless. For a moment we all stared. Then the stranger rose to his feet and began walking towards us across the front lawn. But it was not a normal walk at all. Imagine somebody power walking as fast as they possibly could without running, so that it almost looks robotic. That was how he walked, beside me, and I managed a few words. Run. The three of us bolted for the sliding glass door at the back of the house, not daring to turn back to see if he was hopping the gate. We whipped it open, much to the alarm of the other girls, and fumbled with the lock behind us. There were no curtains to shield us from the dark backyard, so we dragged everybody into the kitchen and sat on the floor. There we described to the others what we had seen. "Are you sure it wasn't just Josh playing a trick on you?" one of the girls asked skeptically. "Positive," Brandy replied. She started to say something else, but her words were cut short. Boom, boom, boom. Several of the girls shrieked. Somebody was at the front of the house, pounding on the large living room window. Not knocking, mind you, but literally pounding. They were obviously hitting the window with full force. Then we heard it again. "What do they want?" one of the girls whispered. None of us knew. Once more we heard it. After the third set of knocks, there was a long and very tense silence. I think most of us were terrified that he would hop the gate and come around to the sliding door, which aside from being uncovered was also fairly easy to unlock. After a couple of minutes of silence, Anna leaped to her feet. "I'm going to get my stepdad," she declared. Several of us worked up the courage to follow her to the foot of the stairs. Despite it being close to both the front door and the window, both of which thankfully have curtains, her stepdad was already standing at the top of the stairs, totally perplexed, with her mom lurking behind him. "What the heck are you girls doing?" he asked. All at once, we clamored to explain that there was a strange man outside, that he had been sitting on the curb but ran at us when he saw us, and that just now he had been pounding on the window. "I'm getting my gun," the stepdad said, and he emerged a few minutes later with a shotgun. We all waited with bated breath as he unlocked the door and stepped out front. There were a few moments of silence as he looked around, and then he came back inside and locked the door behind him, clearly annoyed. "There's no one out there. Now keep it down, I've got work in the morning," he said. There was no arguing with him, but needless to say, none of us slept much that night. By the following morning, some of the girls were trying to justify it, speculating that one of the boys they invited might have sent a family member as a prank, but that just never made any sense to me. No normal late middle-aged or elderly man would agree to terrorize a bunch of little girls unless he was already a twisted weirdo to begin with. Years later, I made the connection that we were incredibly close to Patton State Hospital, as in within reasonable walking distance, which is a pretty massive mental institution, but I don't know if there were any escapes that year. The most reasonable explanation is that it was somebody on drugs, I suppose, but it was terrifying no matter who they were, especially considering the suit and briefcase get-up. What was up with that? Following that night, I don't recall ever spending the night at Anna's again, but I think it was more because her stepfather was a jerk and my mom didn't want me around him anymore. Anna's mom and stepfather divorced a few years later, and Anna moved out of state. I never saw any of her friends again. And while we've kept in touch, we don't talk much about our childhood, and we never discuss what happened that night. I thought about bringing it up, but I also worry it might bring back other painful memories of everything going on with her stepfather at that time. So, I don't know if that would be appropriate. Anyways, thank you guys for taking the time to read this, or listen. It was an interesting experience typing it out, as I've only ever told it out loud before, and very rarely. We moved into a house in the country about 4 months ago. Since we'd previously lived in an apartment, that means we need to buy a lawnmower. Instead of spending $200 plus on a lawnmower when we have to move in a few years, we decided to hire somebody to cut our grass. Initially, we went with a guy that my fiance used to work with, but $65 every 2 weeks starts to add up, and I was looking for something cheaper. That brings me to Charles. Charles posted in my Facebook classified that he was looking for some lawns to cut this weekend and had a reputable company, so I sent him a message. Initially, Charles came off as nice. He asked for my address so he could stop by and give me an estimate. After stopping by my house, he sent me a message saying, "Damn, you got a big porch." I told him my off days, but he assured me I didn't have to be home. I told him to come Wednesday. Wednesday morning, he messaged me. "Are you home?" I said no. 3 hours later, "Are you home yet?" I told him no, I won't be home till after 8. Charles then informed me that his tire had a flat and he would come tomorrow. Thursday, first thing in the morning, he messaged me. "Will you be home today?" I told him no. He messages back a few hours later. Hey, are you home? No. I told you I wouldn't be home all day. Are you still coming out? He then told me his truck broke down. He was sending messages like, please don't be upset with me, sweetheart. At this point, I was getting really creeped out. I told him just to come tomorrow. Friday, it's actually my off day, but I woke up and left the house for the day. He messages me. Hey, I'm coming. You're off today, right? I said, yeah, but I'm not home. When will you be home? I don't know. He messaged me later saying, sorry, babe. I was loading the equipment onto my truck and it fell and broke. Maybe I can come tomorrow. At this point, I was really creeped out and I told him, never mind, I'm going to find somebody else. Saturday, I get off work around 4 or 5 and check my phone and find multiple messages from him saying that he has cut my grass and I need to come home and give him the money. I told him, no, I'll cash app it to you. He started getting really irate and saying that I need to give him the cash now. I told him I would give him the money after I got home and saw the grass was cut. I was honestly really worried he would be waiting at my house, so I got a friend to drive home behind me. He wasn't there and I sent him the money and I thought that was the end of it. Fast forward to about 2 months later, I'm on the phone with my fiance as I drive to class and he tells me he has to get off the phone because there's somebody walking down our driveway. I asked what he meant and he said there was a man walking around in our driveway and front yard. After I got to class, he texted me telling me it was just a man who had come by to promote his lawn care business. I didn't think anything about it as it had been 2 months, but later that night I got home and saw a business card laying on my counter with the name of the man who had been messaging me earlier. I called my fiance Mike at work and asked how the guy had been acting. He said Charles seemed genuinely surprised that a man had come out and asked if he lived alone. I asked Mike if the man had stopped at any other houses and he replied, now that I think about it, I don't think so. After he left our house, he just left. Mike said he seemed really desperate to help around the house and offered to cut the lawn, fix our porch, remove any trash or scrap metal we had around the house, and then asked if we had pests such as bats in our attic or anything. That especially freaked me out as we do have a bat problem and I had previously posted about it on Facebook. Mike then said that was really weird was Charles was very freaked out about the dog. He heard Max barking from inside and started asking a lot of questions like, is he big? Does he stay outside or inside? Does he ever go outside or does he stay inside completely and how big is he? Is he nice? Mike chalked it up to him being scared of dogs. He gave him a brief tour of the outside of the house and then Charles got in his truck and left. I then told Mike that this was the same guy who had been messaging me earlier in the year and Mike began to freak out. He said that Charles had asked a lot of really specific questions about who all lived here, how long they had lived here, where they were at the time. He said he tried to brush them off, but Charles seemed really insistent on knowing if Mike was the only one in the house. Before he left, Mike specifically asked him if he had cut the lawn here before or something and was maybe thinking of the last owners. But Charles told him, no, I just happened to be out this way and thought I'd promote my business in the neighborhood. The worst part, I had taken my fiance's car to work that day, which means my car was in the driveway when Charles dropped by. He thought I was home alone. I didn't contact the police because I thought I might be overreacting. This all happened 2 days ago, and I really hope I never have to see him again. After I graduated high school, I moved to a small city in southern Ontario, Canada, called Kitchener. I hated the idea of living in residence since I am not the most social person, so I moved into a house with 2 friends from home and 2 other guys that were already living in the house. I am a very independent person, so I thoroughly enjoyed having my own bedroom and bathroom. At this point, my boyfriend and I had been together for a year, and he wanted us to move in together. However, I refused. I love him, but I need my own space, and a lot of it sometimes. A couple weeks into the school year, I was invited to go out to a house party, not far from my house. I don't typically like going to parties because of my anxiety. I get very anxious being around a large number of people, but I decided to go and be a little social with some fellow classmates. I have not always got along with my fellow females. I find many of them exhausting to be around, so my main group of friends consists of mostly guys. I spend the majority of my time chatting with the guy I knew from my classes, Alan. He is similar to me in a few ways, and we bonded over a mutual love of the Legend of Zelda series. I noticed he brought another male companion with him to this house party. I didn't notice him hanging around at first, but eventually I felt his eyes burning a hole into me, and it made me a bit uncomfortable. I tried to be friendly and introduce myself to him, but he didn't say anything. I shrugged it off and just figured he was shy. When the guy that was there with Alan left for the bathroom, Alan apologized for his friend's behavior. I'm sorry about Sean. He is actually a buddy's brother. He doesn't have a lot of friends, so I said he could come along. I reassured him that there was no reason for him to apologize. I could relate to Sean on that level and felt a little bit of sympathy for him. Throughout the night, Sean's behaviors did not change. Even when I was not around Alan, Sean would always stick at least 6 feet behind me, always staring after me. I felt it was time for me to leave, which I felt quite relieved about, thinking this should fill my social quota for the next couple of months. My boyfriend doesn't like the idea of me walking home alone, especially this late at night. He had to work early, so he could not walk me home. So Alan offered to take the walk since he knows my boyfriend quite well. Of course, since Alan was going, Sean came too. He didn't walk with us. He stayed about 10 meters behind us, which of course I felt was odd. But of course, I tried not to pay much attention to it. However, if you have anxiety, this is easier said than done. We made it to my house and Alan left as I was walking up my driveway. It was at this point that I realized Sean was not around. I didn't see him leave with Alan, nor did he walk me up my driveway. Again, I tried to not pay much attention to this observation, but of course it kept nagging at me, begging for me to give it my full attention. I fumbled with my keys and was about to put the key into the keyhole when Sean popped out of the bush next to my door. To say it startled me would be quite the understatement. I damn near crapped myself. Breathing heavily, he stared into my eyes and said, "Nice place. I'll see you later." And with that, he was gone. I hurried inside and locked the door quickly behind me. I went around to all the windows and doors, making sure they were all shut and locked. This is a part of my nightly routine, but I made sure to do it much slower tonight, double and then triple checking every entrance to the house. I went up to my room and my phone dinged as I received a notification from Facebook. It was a friend request from Sean. I ignored the request. Before I headed off to bed, my phone rang again. This time it was a message from a number I didn't recognize. I never answer calls from numbers I don't know, or texts, so I ignored it and went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had 55 text messages from this unknown number. I had my suspicions that it was Sean, but now I could confirm it. I was going to school for nursing at the time, and some of his messages were about him calling me his naughty little nurse, and now he wanted me to stick him with needles and then do it to myself. He would describe my body in great detail. I didn't reply to him. I blocked the number, but it made no difference. He would message me on Facebook, so I reported and blocked him. However, he would make new profiles and message me from them. This went on for a couple of weeks before it started to get much worse. I was heading back to my room after having a shower and I noticed that I had a message from Facebook. It read, "I love when your red hair is wet. It looks like blood." My stomach felt like it dropped down to my feet. There is a small window in my bathroom. I have never felt so violated in my life. I had enough at this point and decided to call the police. I showed them all the messages he had been sending me from different accounts and numbers. I also told them about his most recent message about the shower. They went outside to look around the area around my bathroom window. What they found still disgusts me to this day. They found sperm all over the bush under my window. The police told me they would go and speak with him and left. I was furious they didn't do more. I head back into my room to see I have another message on my screen. "No one can save you now," it said. I have never felt so helpless in my life. Perhaps if more were done, it wouldn't have gotten as bad as it did. I didn't tell anybody about what was happening, especially not my boyfriend, not my parents or my roommates or my closest friends. Things started to escalate even more. He started to follow me home when I got off work, so I always had a coworker walk home with me, since he lived in the same area. I always knew Sean was there. I could sense him following out of sight under cover of darkness, eyes burning into me as usual. About a month later, my coworker had to go home early. He wasn't feeling well, and so I had to walk myself home. It had been a few days since I felt him follow me home, so I tried to tell myself that he had probably given up. It was a peaceful night. Beautiful. I didn't get the usual feeling that Sean was following me, to which I felt very relieved. Maybe it was finally over. I thought to myself, but boy was I ever wrong. Another benefit to having an anxiety disorder, in my case at least, is you become very aware of your surroundings. I know everything about my house and where everything is supposed to be. My roommates all went to their families' homes for the weekend, so I knew I'd be coming home to a fully locked and secure house. Walking up to the front door, I got this feeling that something was wrong. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything in the front hallway was in order. I walked into the living room where we had a sliding glass door leading out to the patio. It was then that I stopped dead and I noticed it. The sliding door was not locked properly. The lock on it is kind of hard to push down for it to lock all the way. When I looked at it, it was only halfway down, as if somebody tried to lock it but didn't push it down the rest of the way when the lock started to resist. It was at this moment that I literally froze with fear. My roommates left before I left for work, so I locked up the house myself. Even if any of them came back while I was at work, they never used the patio door since they have keys. Plus, they all know about the fight you have to have with the door in order for it to lock completely. I ran into the basement and locked myself in the bathroom and called the police. It seemed like hours passed by before I heard a firm knock at the bathroom door and heard a male voice saying, Police. Open up. I didn't move at first, afraid that whoever broke in was just trying to get me out of the bathroom. But I heard a muffled, static voice from the policeman's radio. I opened the door to be greeted by 3 cops standing in front of me. "We found the man who broke into your house," said one of the officers. "He was hiding up in your bedroom." I didn't have to ask who the man was. Of course I knew who he was. I allowed myself to be led upstairs by the cops so I can identify the guy in the car as the guy who had been harassing me. When I looked into the car, Sean was staring back at me. He smiled maniacally up at me. "That's him," I said softly to the cops. Before I turned to walk back into the house, I saw him mouth the words, "I'll see you later." I was told by police that when they found him in my room, he was hiding under my bed with a weapon. I didn't want to know the details about this weapon since I was already scared enough. There is no doubt in my mind that my life would have been ended had I not been as observant as I am. He was sent to jail and my life has changed forever. For somebody as independent as I am, changing into a person who is petrified to be by themselves concerned a lot of people around me. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone, not even my boyfriend. I never wanted to worry any of them, especially my family. I found out a few weeks ago that he was released from jail, and I received a notification on Facebook from him sending me a friend request. Not sure if this story belongs here, but I can still remember this day like it was yesterday. My mom's words clinging to my eardrums like plastic wrap on a leftover plate. "I need you and your friends to be extra careful. There have been reports of a white truck following little girls home. If you see your friends walking alone, don't let them. You can walk with them until they get there, and do not leave them until they reach their front door." To ease her worry, I began walking with everyone to school and back home. It took me longer to get home, but I had the safest location on my street. At that time, my house could see into all the surrounding parks and school playgrounds and sat on top of the hill. It was the next door to both the mayor of the housing authority and the SFC, Sergeant First Class of the military police. Edit, in my mom's defense, she was a single mom of 4 and was active duty. I didn't have the luxury of getting rides to school when typically she was out of the home at 5 a.m. and didn't return until 5 p.m. Even in the summer, school started at 8 a.m. and ended at 3 p.m. And you could only take a bus to school if you lived more than 3 miles from campus. In case you didn't know, the military is a full-time job, regardless of your home situation or your kids. When you get orders, you follow them or risk demotions or being dishonorably discharged. I did the same routine every day. Go across the street through the 2 houses, down to the sidewalk, go through an alleyway until I reach the Tank Destroyer Trail, walk half a mile to the concrete bridge that goes over the street, and finally down the other side to the school side doors. Reverse order. Repeat every year for 3 years. My mom was a drill sergeant, and until that morning, I had never really taken her words seriously. I remember telling her, "We live on a military base, Mom. There's no way I'll ever go missing, and besides, I can scream." It's summer in Central Texas. It's a blistering hot day, and summer school has been dismissed early. I and a few of my friends are walking home together, but today it's eerily quiet between us. My gut is buzzing like an angry hive the further away we get from the school. For whatever reason, I felt like I was being watched. I do a scan of the area and notice there are no other students around but myself, Aubrey, Ashley, and Amber. Nothing is being said as we get halfway across the bridge, so I break the silence and ask if they're okay. Ashley responds, "My mom and dad have been warning me about this truck that's following kids home." Aubrey chimes in, "Mine too. I think they're just trying to scare us." "But why?" I ask. "What purpose would that serve them to do that? Maybe to keep tabs on us?" Aubrey replied while looking at her phone. Aubrey's dad was a bit of a control freak, but I doubt that he would even done something that drastic to control her. If that were the case, then there would be no need for all of our parents to warn us. "Well, I'm going to go home this way today," Ashley says as she starts to take a different route home. "What about the truck?" Amber grabs Ashley's hand and grips it tightly. "You need to stay with us." I look over at Aubrey, who's walking a bit faster down the trail. I can hear the fear in her voice. I'm getting out of here before something bad happens. My hair practically jumps off my body hearing her say those words. All of the danger bells and whistles are going off so loudly that I can barely hear myself talk. "Ashley, at least let us walk you there," I pled. She reluctantly agrees and comes back to the trail with us. Aubrey is a good length ahead of us, and so we yell for her to slow down. She turns around and I can see the whites of her eyes. I turn just slightly to my right from the corner of my eye. There's an all-white truck, no license plate, and a tinted front window so you couldn't see the driver. It was slowly driving by the curb on the main road, and it was definitely following us. There were no other cars around, and that made it all the more creepy. I stopped walking and looked straight at the truck. I tried to see if I could make out any distinctive marks, make or model, but it didn't even have a brand on it. Ford, Chevy, Nissan. No grill emblem at all. Friends stopped, and then we all stared. Whoever was in the driver's seat was certainly looking back at us. All of us held our breaths and waited for it to leave. It didn't. My every sense was telling me to run. My gut was telling me to run. My fight or flight was the only flight at that point. I already knew what was going to come next. I placed my leg behind me, and as I took a step back, it's going to chase us. We need to run. Before the others could respond, the engine of the truck roared like a lion. The front tires jumped the curb, and the truck came barreling down the trail. That half a mile seemed to take forever to run down. We bolted down the trail as fast as we could. It definitely was gaining on us. We get to the end of the trail and stop at the sidewalk that's by my neighborhood street. It was still chasing us. We all shouted and screamed. Aubrey tried to grab her cell phone and dial 911, but dropped it as we were running. Where was everyone? How was no one hearing us cry out? Behind all these houses, whose backyards led to the walking trail? How was that even possible? Is no one seeing this? How can no one hear us? I tell them all to follow me to my house, and we finally get there. The front door is locked, and I don't have my house key. We immediately go next door to the military police officer's house and begin hurling our fists at the door, screaming for help. The officer isn't home, but his wife is. She opens the door and we frantically get inside. We force her out of the way as we all run inside and slam the door shut. Miss Janet is asking us all kinds of questions, but we tell her to be quiet. We don't even make it to the couch. We all stand by the door and try to stay away from the windows. We hear the truck drive by and decide no one leaves until Miss Janet's husband comes home. Just thinking about it as I'm typing, this makes my stomach hurt 11 years later. Even now I find myself grasping for air. My mouth dries out, and my neck stings as if hot needles are being forced down my esophagus. When he came home, he made formal police reports and he told our parents, teachers, and other students about the incident, but we never heard any other updates from the truck. From then on, teachers were on every post of the trail for kids walking home from the school. Military police officers were and still are posted on every corner within a 2-mile radius of the school.